Welcome to Sandomy. Today we are opening the file on a contradiction that sits right at the heart of the housing debate in this country. It is something that I think is a source of immense frustration for many of us working in the sector.
Yeah, it really is. And frankly, it is frustrating for anyone paying attention to the market right now.
Exactly. We spend so much airtime debating the housing crisis. The lack of supply, the Greenbelt planning reforms, the sheer difficulty of getting anything built.
Right. But while we are having those arguments, we're often walking past the answer, literally walking past it on the street,
It is the elephant in the room, or perhaps more accurately, the empty house on the street.
which presents a paradox that is incredibly difficult to reconcile with the urgency of the current situation. I mean, you look at this purely as a supply chain issue in a manufacturing context, and you would say the system is entirely broken.
Because you open any council agenda, and it is a desperate narrative of shortage. We have skyrocketing rents, a lack of affordable inventory, and record numbers of families in temporary accommodation because there simply isn't anywhere for them to go.
And yet simultaneously, we have a massive volume of infrastructure that is already built, standing idle and in many cases just rotting away.
So the core question we are exploring today is this. What if the solution to the housing crisis isn't solely about pouring concrete for new developments, but unlocking the capacity that we already have?
And that is the central question being asked during National Empty Homes Week 2026. When we look at the data, and we will get into the specifics shortly, the scale of what we already have is truly significant. It challenges the assumption that we can simply build our way out of this crisis without addressing the existing stock.
Let us get the headline number out of the way immediately, because it really sets the stakes for you as a listener. When people hear empty homes, they might think of a few holiday cottages in Cornwall left empty for the winter.
Or maybe a flat in London used for business trips. But no, we are looking at the latest government figures for England. And the headline is that over 300,000 homes are currently classed as long-term empty.
Over 300,000. And just to be precise for our listeners, we should define that strictly. This is not just a gap between tenants where a landlord is painting the walls.
Correct. This is the statutory definition used for council tax purposes. These are properties that have been vacant and unfurnished for over 6 months. Essentially, they are abandoned or stalled.
And that figure of 300,000 is the highest level we've seen in over a decade.
It is. And looking at the trend lines, the trajectory is moving in the wrong direction. It is not flattening out.
It is spiking.
It is accelerating, which is the real concern for policymakers. We saw a 14% rise in just 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a faster rate of increase than we saw even during the peaks of the pandemic lockdowns. It suggests that something systemic is breaking down. The stock is leaking out of the market faster than we are bringing it back in.
That 14% jump is a massive acceleration. So against that backdrop, National Empty Homes Week 2026 feels particularly critical this year. It runs from Monday the 9th of March to Sunday the 15th.
Organized by Action on Empty Homes, which is the national charity working with councils and communities, they have chosen a theme this year that I find quite interesting.
Homes into hope. Impact in our communities.
It might sound a little abstract on the surface, homes into hope, but when you dig into the policy framework they are proposing, is actually a very hard-nosed economic argument.
I agree completely. It sounds like a slogan, but it represents a deliberate pivot in the narrative. For years, the discussion around empty homes has been almost entirely about blight, complaining about an eyesore or a ruin.
Right. The shift here is to view these properties as a strategic asset class. A strategic opportunity. It is about turning liabilities into assets.
Because an empty Victorian terrace house isn't just a pile of decaying bricks and mortar. It is a wasted infrastructure investment. The road is already there. The sewer connection is there.
The gas line is there. For local authorities this week is about showcasing the powers they have, like enforcement and incentives or advice for owners. And crucially is to back councils in calling for government support and investment to reverse this waste of housing stock.
I want to drill down into those numbers you brought up earlier, because 303,000 to be exact is a big abstract figure. How does that distribute across the country?
If you average it out across the entire housing stock, that represents roughly 1 in every 80 homes in England.
1 in 80. So statistically, if you walk down a few streets in your neighborhood or drive through a typical town, you are likely passing one.
Very likely, yes. And we have to remember that is just the strict long-term empty definition. If we widen the aperture to include short-term empties and second homes that aren't anyone's primary residence, the number explodes.
We're talking about the furnished but empty category or the occasional use category.
Exactly. When you include those, the figure swells to over 1 million residential properties not serving as primary residences. That is roughly 4% of the entire housing stock of England sitting on the sidelines.
4% is a massive margin in a market as tight as housing. In any other commodity market, if you removed ready, 4% of the supply prices would go haywire.
Which is exactly what we see in housing. That withheld supply creates upward pressure on prices and rents for everyone else.
And this is where the moral dimension crashes into the economic one.
Yeah.
Because we have these million-plus dormant units, and on the other side of the ledger, we have the temporary accommodation crisis.
This is the statistic that keeps housing officers awake at night. We currently have over 131,000 households formally living in temporary accommodation.
And temporary accommodation can be a bit of a euphemism. We are often talking about B&Bs, converted office blocks, and hostels.
Often in environments that are totally unsuitable for long-term living, and within those households there are 169,000 children.
A staggering number of children without a permanent home. So if we look at the math here, we have roughly double the number of long-term empty homes as we have homeless households.
On paper, yes. Obviously, geography plays a role. An empty house in a low-demand area doesn't immediately solve the problem for a family in a high-demand city. But the aggregate mismatch is undeniable. We have the units, they're just in the wrong legal or physical state.
It is a strategic failure of resource allocation. And it is incredibly expensive. English councils are spending a colossal amount on this mismatch.
Yes, they are. It costs English councils £1 billion annually in temporary accommodation fees.
That is essentially dead money.
It is emergency spending. It keeps a roof overhead for a night or a week, but it builds nothing. It creates no asset. It fixes no long-term problem. It is basically bailing water out of a leaking boat rather than plugging the hole.
Let us shift gears and talk about the neighborhood experience. Because we can talk about billions of pounds and national statistics, but for you as a listener, the reality is that specific house at the end of the block.
The one with the boarded-up windows and the overgrown garden.
Right. It undermines neighborhoods beyond just supply issues. It brings everyone else down.
It really does. It starts with the visual blight.
Yeah.
The physical deterioration like damp structural issues and unsafe wiring, which, by the way, make properties more expensive to fix the longer they are left. But then it escalates into a safety issue.
This brings us to the crime and safety correlation, the classic broken window theory.
Yes. There is a direct correlation between vacant properties and antisocial behavior, vandalism, squatting, arson, and fly tipping. One broken window signals that nobody cares, and then there is the economic strain.
The impact on neighboring property values. If you are trying to sell your house and the one next door looks like it hasn't been touched in a decade, you are taking a massive hit.
You are, and it strains local services, police, fire enforcement. So the neighbors pay for it, and the local council pays for it through call-outs.
Which brings us to the positive ripple effect, the solution, flipping the narrative to the benefits of restoration.
When you fix one of these places, you reverse the decline. You get a family, and so a family gets a home, and community pride returns.
You generate economic activity, too. Local tradespeople, like plumbers and electricians, get work.
Exactly. And the broken window effect is reversed so the street feels safer. Plus, critically for the local authority, council tax revenue is restored.
It turns a tax drain into a contributor.
It is the definition of a win-win for the community. And to see how this plays out on the ground, we can look at Kent as a microcosm of the national trend.
Kent is a great example. You have wealthy commuter belts near London, struggling coastal towns and rural villages. It captures the whole spectrum. So what do the numbers look like there?
There are 8,729 long-term empty homes in Kent if we exclude Medway.
And with Medway included.
Medway adds an additional roughly 11,155 long-term empties, bringing the total to around 10,000 across the region.
And the trend there mirrors the national acceleration, unfortunately.
It does. They have seen a 40% increase in empties across Kent and Medway since 2019. That is a very sharp rise. But what is fascinating in the data is the disparity between the local councils.
Give me an example of that difference. Because local action and intervention strategies seem to matter significantly.
They absolutely do. The problem is not inevitable. Look at Thanet, which faces coastal challenges and rising numbers, but then look at an area like Tunbridge and Malling.
They had quite a bit of success, didn't they?
They did. They achieved a net reduction of 76 empty homes in a single year.
Now, 76 doesn't sound like a huge number when you say it fast, but in this industry, that is massive.
It is 76 complicated legal, financial, and probate knots untied. And they did it through early intervention. They track homes that have been empty for just 6 months and engage the owners immediately.
Catching the issue before it becomes chronic, like a medical intervention. Which leads us to Kent's No Use Empty Initiative,
Yes.
or NUE.
Right. It is the UK's longest-running program, launched back in 2005. It operates to show that the tools do exist to fix this.
It is a recyclable loan fund, essentially. That is the genius of it. The council lends money to a developer or owner to renovate a derelict property.
They do the work, bring it up to standard, sell it, or rent it out and repay the loan to the council. Then the council lends that same money out to the next person.
So the money circulates.
Exactly. It proves that this isn't a problem of not knowing what to do. We have the toolkit. The challenge is just scaling it and getting every council to adopt that proactive mindset.
Let us pivot to the debate between build versus renovate, because we hear politicians chanting build, build, build constantly. But you're arguing that renovating might be smarter in many cases.
Building new homes is obviously part of the solution, but renovating has two massive advantages that new builds simply cannot compete with: speed and carbon.
Let us talk about that speed argument first, because renovating an existing shell is faster than planning permitting and laying roads.
The shell is there. The infrastructure is there.
Yeah.
You are cutting the timeline from years to months. If you have a housing crisis now, you need homes now, renovation delivers that.
And the sustainability argument is just as compelling. The fabric-first approach.
Exactly. You have a unique opportunity to retrofit empty homes because there are no residents to displace. Trying to retrofit a Victorian terrace when a family is living in it is a nightmare, but an empty home is a blank canvas.
You can do deep retrofits like insulation walls, floors, without disrupting lives.
And you save on embodied carbon. The greenest home is the one that is already built. Reusing the structure saves the massive carbon cost of new materials like concrete and steel.
And upgrading these to modern standards with heat pumps and solar creates low-carbon, energy-efficient homes for the future. Operational carbon is drastically reduced.
You are future-proofing the stock. It is the perfect moment to do the heavy lifting on net zero targets.
I want to ground this in some real stories. Evidence of hope, as they call it. You mentioned the Pigeon Hotel in Folkestone.
Yes, a derelict Victorian townhouse that was literally inhabited by pigeons for 20 years, open to the elements.
20 years is a long time for a property to just rot on a residential street.
It is, but a developer came in, used the NUE loan scheme, cleared out the pigeons, and transformed the single ruin into 5 modern flats.
5 homes from one disaster. And it completely stabilizes the street for the neighbor.
Exactly. And it is not just residential properties either. Look at the wine warehouse in Ramsgate. A commercial empty turned into a community hub and co-working space, showing impact beyond just residential.
Or the old bank in Wingham.
Right. A former Lloyd's bank converted into 4 modern homes, revitalizing a village high street, putting people right back into the center of the village to buy coffee and keep the area alive.
It really highlights that every empty home represents a choice. It isn't like the weather. We don't just have to endure it. It can remain a liability or it can become a home.
That is the core message. Every empty home is a choice.
As we wrap up this discussion, I want to look ahead. In the rest of this series, we will be exploring the technical toolkit for owners, doing deep dives into retrofit technology and looking at specific council strategies.
It is going to be highly practical.
But for now, we have a call to action. For you listening, if you are a resident and you see an empty home, report it.
Don't just walk past it and grumble. Councils cannot fix what they don't know about. And for owners, explore the support available. There are loans and VAT reductions. You don't have to do it alone.
And for professionals, ask, what more can we unlock? We need to treat empty homes as a public resource issue. Because with the right approach combining policy funding and community will feel, we can turn despair into hope for those waiting for a key.
We absolutely can. The opportunity is sitting right under our noses.
And I will leave you with this final thought. As we master the art of residential conversions, imagine what happens if we apply this same urgency to empty commercial spaces above high street shops. How many more thousands of units could we unlock right in our town centers without breaking a single piece of new ground? Thank you for listening to Sand to Me.